Afternoon, everyone. Hope you've all been having a good week. For those who were here last week, you know that at our house we've been on chicken pox watch. So far there have been no appearance of spots, so thank you for anyone who's been praying for that. Hopefully we'll be in the clear before too long. Well, the past few weeks have been a season where many activities are typically on a year-end break due to holidays and business shutdowns. And while we don't join in the holiday celebrations, we are also on break from normal work and school schedules in many cases and take the opportunity to enjoy Winter Family Weekend or winter camp or other activities that we normally couldn't do. The kids, of course, look forward to their time off school, and we generally have a break from the normal Sabbath school and teen studies also. Now that break is over and all the normal activities are resuming, it's a good time to consider a topic that's applicable for all of us in the congregation, including our young people who are going to be resuming youth instruction classes. The lessons that will be presented in youth instruction as it resumes in the next couple of weeks are on different subjects, but they are all closely related by a common theme. The three lessons that are going to start out this month are Level 1, talking about the Beatitudes and the Sermon on the Mount with a special focus on how God is our comforter. Level 2 is going to be talking about Psalm 23 with a special focus on God wanting us to depend on Him in tough times. And the teen class is going to be about various kinds of addictions. One powerful theme that's present in all of these topics and very applicable for all of us in the congregation is that God is there for us when we are struggling. There is a verse in one of the Psalms that very meaningfully addresses this theme in an inspired statement about God's intentions for us. And it tells us how God will fulfill those intentions. So in the time that we have remaining, let's examine what God revealed through the psalmist David about his long-term plan to support us when we need him, and two things that he will do to accomplish that plan. Let's go to Psalm 138. Psalm 138. And to get a bit of context, we'll start in verse 7. Psalm 138, verse 7. David wrote, "Though I walk in the midst of trouble, you will revive me. You will stretch out your hand against the wrath of my enemies, and your right hand." This verse is a bit of a lead-in into the long-term intentions. Throughout our lives, there are inevitably times when we will walk in the midst of trouble, as it says. This can take many forms and result in many outcomes of differing degrees, from mild discomfort to heart-wrenching agony. Sometimes the trouble that we walk in is evident to others, but sometimes it's known only to us and God. The statements in verse 7 about God responding to our troubles are certainly comforting: to be revived, to have enemies thwarted, to be saved. And they are wonderful, but they aren't necessarily permanent, because often another day of trouble will come. When one enemy is removed, another may come to take its place. So often in life we are saved out of one difficulty only to struggle again on another day with another problem. Verse 8 then, David wrote, "The Lord will perfect that which concerns me." The Lord will perfect that which concerns me. The Hebrew word translated as perfect in this verse is gomar, Strong's number 1584, which can also be translated as complete. Our God will complete, bring to a conclusion, not leave unfinished the important matters of our lives, including the things that trouble us. The Nelson Study Bible points out that the same word can also be translated perform, as it is in Psalm 57:2, where David wrote, "I will cry out to God Most High, to God who performs all things for me. So clearly this word implies action and reassures us that God will act on our behalf. This verse also reminds us that God hasn't called us because we are already in a state of perfection or completion. Much rather, he has called us to bring us into, to transform us into that state of being perfected and completed and whole. How will he do that? How will God bring the unresolved issues of our lives to completion? David was inspired to capture two characteristics about God's work with us that will enable the long-term fulfillment of his perfecting work within us. The second portion of verse 8 then states, "Your mercy, O Lord, endures forever. Do not forsake the work of your hands." So first, our God acts with enduring mercy toward us. God acts with enduring mercy toward us. Song number 79 in our hymnal, "His Mercy Never Fails," is taken from Psalm 136, very close to where we're reading here. And it rehearses many aspects of God's powerful deliverance for Israel with the reassuring refrain, "His mercy endures forever," after every statement. The majority of the statements speak to God's mercy to Israel collectively. But toward the end of that psalm, there is a phrase that focuses in verse 23 on the personal, individual impact as well. It states that God has remembered us in our lowly state. The New Living Translation has that verse as, "He remembered us in our weakness." Those weaknesses come in many different forms for all of us. And regardless of what the particular thing or things that we struggle with individually are, our struggles are deeper and have a lasting impact on us internally, more often internally than they do externally. We've been talking a lot as a congregation recently about the blessing of our new church facility here. And during the first service here, Mr. Kubik spoke about some of the lessons that we could take from Solomon's dedication of the first temple. Mr. Kubik didn't specifically cover this in his sermon, but there's one statement in Solomon's prayer of dedication that powerfully highlights the internal impact of our weaknesses. Let's go to 1 Kings 8, 1 Kings chapter 8, where that prayer of dedication is 1 Kings chapter 8. And we'll read verse 38 where Solomon was praying and he stated, "Whatever prayer, whatever supplication is made by anyone or by all your people Israel, when each one knows the plague of his own heart," the plague of his own heart. It's true, isn't it, that the heaviest difficulties that we carry within us can be much like a plague permeating every aspect of our lives. The Hebrew word translated as plague in this verse is negah, Strong's number 5061, which can also be translated as disease or mark, as in the scars left by a disease, such as leprosy. To state the meaning another way then, our difficulties leave their mark on us. Again, very often internally more than externally. In the next verse, Solomon's prayer speaks directly to the response that we yearn for when we encounter these kinds of difficulties. Verse 39, Solomon continued the prayer, "Then hear in heaven your dwelling place, and forgive and act, and give to everyone each according to his ways." Solomon prayed that God would continue to be a force of movement in our lives, to hear, to forgive, to act, to help us break through the places where we are trapped and stuck within our own limitations. Our God hears these prayers, and he does and will respond by acting with that enduring mercy until we are transformed and complete. The second thing that David had mentioned then in Psalm 138, verse 8, is that our God is committed to us. Our God is committed to us. The last portion of what David wrote in that verse was in the form of a request, asking God not to forsake us, the work of his hands. It's a bit of a rhetorical request, though, with a clearly implied belief that there is no danger of God forsaking us. David was assured that it was true, that no one who earnestly seeks to serve and to love and to obey God is in danger of being forsaken by him. No doubt David was familiar with and took comfort in some of the specific promises God had already made in that regard. One example of that ties in very well with what David wrote is in Deuteronomy 4. Deuteronomy 4. And in verse 30, the context shows that, again, what was being talked about here was times where Israel, God's people, would be in distress. So again, the concept of times of trouble. And in verse 31, it says, "For the Lord your God is a merciful God. He will not forsake you, nor destroy you, nor forget the covenant of your fathers, which he swore to them." So the beginning of the verse ties in with the first characteristic of God that we examined, his enduring mercy toward us. Because of that mercy, Moses was inspired to say, because of that great mercy, God will not abandon us or forget the covenants that he has made throughout mankind's history. So again, simply stated, God is committed to us. God's commitment to us, of course, is what we both respond to and further symbolize in the two major covenants that we can enter into, the covenant of baptism and the covenant of marriage. In both cases, it is intended to be a permanent, enduring commitment, just like the commitment that God has already made to us. Jesus Christ also affirmed that level of commitment that he and the Father have for us in a very meaningful way during the evening of his last Passover. Let's go to John 14. John 14, as he was speaking with the disciples on that evening, John 14, and in verse 18, he makes the statement, "I will not leave you orphans. I will come to you." The Merriam-Webster Online Dictionary defines an orphan in the figurative sense as one deprived of some protection or advantage. And the literal meaning of a child having lost its parents is perhaps one of the most profound forms of human aloneness that one could experience. The American Standard Version translates this statement that Christ made as, "I will not leave you desolate." So with the root word of this mean implying separation from parents or a guardian, Jesus again was clearly saying, "I will not leave you lacking what you need. I will not leave you in that condition." So throughout God's revelation to us within his word, it is clear again and again that God is fully and completely committed to us. So in conclusion, then, we've seen through David's writing in the Psalms that our God has a long-term plan to support us when we need him through the development of our character and to bring that development to completion, to a state of perfection that is in the same place as his own perfection and his own existence and character. We've also reviewed two things that God will do to accomplish that plan. He will act with enduring mercy toward us, and he will fulfill his commitment to us. So just as our children and teens will be learning in the upcoming youth instruction classes, we also can have full confidence that our God is there for us when we are struggling.